On 5 News tonight, Parliament pays tribute to Jo Cox, the referendum poster row, and a mother's warning on ecstasy. Roses marked Jo Cox's seat in the Commons as MPs gathered to remember their murdered colleague.
We have lost one of our own, and our society as a whole has lost one of our very best.
Jo Cox was a voice of compassion, whose irrepressible spirit and boundless energy lit up the lives of all who knew her and saved the lives of many she never, ever met.
A senior Conservative switches sides in the EU referendum as the campaigns clash over posters. Claims ecstasy is being targeted at children after 3 12-year-olds overdose. Also tonight, could we be closer to finding out what happened to flight MH370? Pictures are released of personal items found on a Madagascan beach. And the fans getting ready for a big night for England and Wales in the Euros. Welcome to 5 News Tonight. I'm Danny Sinha. Compassionate, loving, determined. Just some of the words used to describe Jo Cox as MPs came together to remember their friend and colleague. Westminster came to a standstill this afternoon as politicians from all sides paid tribute to the West Yorkshire MP who was murdered in her constituency last week. Watching from the public gallery, her husband and 2 young children. Simon Vigar reports.
Wearing the white rose of Yorkshire, MPs gathered to pay tribute, led by the Speaker of the House of Commons.
Colleagues, we meet today in heartbreaking sadness, but also in heartfelt solidarity.
A white rose and a red one for Labour were placed on the bench where Jo Cox used to sit.
Last Thursday, Jo Cox was doing what all of us here do, representing and serving the people who elected her. We have lost one of our own, and our society as a whole has lost one of our very best.
He was followed by the Prime Minister.
May we and the generations of members that follow us in this House honour Jo's memory by proving that the democracy and freedoms Jo stood for are indeed unbreakable, by continuing to stand up for our constituents and by uniting against the hatred that killed her today and forevermore.
Yeah. Unseen by the cameras, Jo Cox's family watched the speeches from a gallery, including her 2 young children. The contributions from the MP's friends were touching and brave.
She inspired us all, and I swear that we will do everything in our power to make her and her family incredibly proud.
Yes. Those words from Jo's maiden speech must therefore truly ring out today. We are far more united and have far more in common with each other than the things that divide us.
But last, let me say this. Batley and Spen will go on to elect a new MP. But no one can replace that mother.
An ally from across the party political divide remembered how Jo Cox grilled a Russian diplomat over Syria.
With clever charm, but steely determination, this 5-foot bundle of old-fashioned Yorkshire common sense dressed him down for his country's cruelty and cynicism in Syria. I do not believe the Russian ambassador will easily forget that visit.
Then MPs left Parliament for a service at their parish church across the road. The words of one of Jo Cox's oldest friends still hung in the air.
This is our time to honour the legacy of the proud Yorkshire lass who dedicated her life to the common good and who was so cruelly taken away from us in the prime of her life. Jo Cox, we love you, we salute you, and we shall never forget you.
Well, some of the many tributes in the House of Commons to MP Jo Cox. The man accused of her murder has been remanded in custody after appearing at the Old Bailey. 52-year-old Thomas Mayer appeared via video link from the top security Belmarsh prison. He's charged with murder, grievous bodily harm and weapons offences. Well, the organisers of a fundraising campaign set up to support Jo Cox's favourite charities say they're blown away by the number of donations. This evening, more than £975,000 has been raised in just 3 days. The money will be split between 3 charities, an organisation which helps civilians caught up in the Syrian war, a group which tackles extremism in Britain, and the Royal Voluntary Service in the MP's own constituency. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Paul Taylor from the RVS. He started off by telling me about his work with Jo.
We got involved with Jo Cox because I think our visions and Jo's were very similar. Jo was very interested in doing something about social isolation and loneliness within our communities and within society. And clearly Royal Voluntary Services has a similar mission. I mean, primarily we're working with older people, but they're older, vulnerable, lonely, isolated people who we're trying to glue back into their communities. And so I think Jo very quickly recognised that synergy. So basically, she invited us all into her office, and very typical of Jo, she sort of sat us around and said, I'm now going to sit and listen because you're the people who are experts in this field. You talk, and then when I've listened to what you've got to say, then I'll see what I can do to help. And that's exactly what she did, and helped us a great deal.
So an advocate for the poor and oppressed, and that seems to be your impression. In that case, how much of a loss is she going to be in your area?
Jo is an immense loss to us. I mean, she was so highly thought of by everybody in the community, everybody within her constituency. Yes, Royal Voluntary Service is one of the beneficiaries of the fund that's been set up, but obviously we would much rather it were otherwise, and that we still had Jo with us to do the fantastic work that she was doing with us, and that she's doing generally, she was doing for the community, for her constituency, and at a national level. So she's a massive loss. We'll certainly miss her drive, her enthusiasm, her commitment, and the fact that she was a genuine partner in trying to do something about loneliness and isolation in our communities.
As you say, though, you have been honoured, though, by being named as one of her favourite charities as part of this memorial fund for her. How much of a difference will that money make?
Clearly, I mean, the fund is rising very rapidly, and I don't think we're necessarily surprised by that because the high esteem that Jo's held in locally and nationally, it's not a surprise that so much money is going into the fund. Obviously, it's very early days. The fund was only sort of set up on Friday evening. There's a lot of money gone into it, but obviously we need to be speaking with Jo's family about what their plans might be for how we use the fund. And also I think it's important, and I think what Jo would have wanted us to do is also to be asking people within the local community, within Batley and Spen, about their ideas for particularly how older people could be more fully integrated into their communities. And we also want to work with other partners locally. So although there will be money coming to Royal Voluntary Service, we very much see it as a partnership with the family, with other organisations locally, and most importantly with the constituents within Batley and Spen.
We wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much, Paul Taylor.
Thank you.
Well, the campaigns over Britain's membership of the European Union has resumed fully today after being paused as a mark of respect. But UKIP leader and Leave campaigner Nigel Farage has accused the Remain side of exploiting Jo Cox's death with its new campaign poster. That came after former Leave supporter Baroness Varsi switched sides in protest at one of his. Our political editor Andy Bell has this report.
2 posters, 2 sides, one for UKIP and Leave, one from the official Remain campaign, both held up by their supporters as reasonable messages, both denounced by their opponents for crossing a line. Nigel Farage launched this poster last week. Now a senior Conservative is saying it was enough to make her change sides.
Unfortunately, those of us at the outset with that very clear, inclusive, moderate vision for Brexit have over time been taken over by a message which is divisive, which is inward-looking, which is xenophobic, and unfortunately is creating deep divide and hate on our streets.
For the official Vote Leave campaign, today promoting a message there'll be more jobs if we vote out, this news came as something of a surprise.
I'm sorry that Baroness Varsley said what she said today. She's not been a part of the Leave campaign up to now. I wasn't aware that she was even on the same side as me in this argument.
And this poster has some on the other side fuming, claiming it's all part of an attempt to use Jo Cox's death to distort the debate. From the Remain campaign,
every single person talks about the politics of hate, the politics of fear, the climate that has led to this awful thing happening, and there is no linkage whatsoever. I make of it just them deliberately and willfully, frankly exploiting a horrendous situation to try and put themselves on the side of right and the Leave side, as if somehow we've got bad, wrong motives.
On almost the last lap, George Osborne was staying on message today, don't risk the economy. But when asked about Jo Cox, did he also have another message for voters about to make up their minds?
We're also united in a celebration of her life and the remarkable woman she was, and how she said, let us remember what unites us more than what divides us. And I think those are good words to have in our heads, not just today, but in the days ahead.
And who can argue with that? But at the end of a very tight, very hard-fought campaign, all these words carry meaning, and they may affect the result.
Andy, just how significant is Baroness Varsley's decision?
Well, she's hardly an important campaigner. To be frank, a lot of people didn't even know which side she was on. But what's important is the way she's tried to characterise the Leave side in these last days of the campaign, essentially saying it's nasty, it's anti-foreigner, it's anti-immigrant. Now, you heard how angry Nigel Farage has been about this, but also I've spoken to a couple of MPs who are on the Leave campaign who also fear that there is an effort going on to somehow link what happened tragically last week to somehow characterise the motives of the Leave campaign, and they worry that that could stick in these last days before the vote.
And picking up on that, of course, we've seen the tributes to Jo Cox today, which is, of course, our top story. I mean, you have been reporting from Westminster for many years. Does today stand out for you?
Yes, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this. Normally when you come into the press gallery above the chamber of the House of Commons, you can hear the hubbub, the noise that MPs are making down below you. Today I came in and it was absolutely silent, but I looked down and the House of Commons chamber was absolutely packed with MPs sitting there completely silent. And then I looked across from where I was sitting to the visitors gallery, the public gallery, and I could see there Jo Cox's husband and her two children looking down, and I'm sure they will have been moved, as everybody else was there, about what was said about Jo Cox. Very positive and really very heartwarming and genuinely felt from MPs from all parties.
Andy, thank you. A murder investigation is underway after an inmate was killed at Long Larton Maximum Security Jail in Worcestershire. Another inmate is being questioned now by police. Footballer Ched Evans has signed for a new club 4 months before he faces a retrial on rape charges. The 27-year-old has joined Chesterfield on a 1-year contract. The club says it put a great deal of thought into the signing and no doubt he should be welcomed back into professional football. 3 12-year-old girls who fell ill after taking ecstasy in Greater Manchester at the weekend are still recovering in hospital. It's believed they'd all been given something known as teddy tablets, which had been mixed into a bottle of soft drink. Well, there is growing concern that ecstasy is becoming stronger and that dealers are increasingly targeting children.
If something's in the shape of a teddy bear, has a Lego logo on it or a MasterCard stamp, these are brands that are well known out there, and certainly people would recognise them and could be attracted to that as well.
Well, I'm joined now by one mother who knows the dangers of drugs firsthand. Fiona Spargo-Mabs lost her son Daniel when he was just 16 years old after he took MDMA, which is the chemical used in ecstasy. Good to have you with us, Fiona. Difficult as it is, your son wasn't one of the lucky ones. I mean, just explain to us what happened.
Well, he went out. I thought he was going to a party, but he went to a illegal rave with a group of boys, mostly friends of friends from another school, and a group of them were taking ecstasy, and Dan was decided that he would as well, and it just turned out that the ecstasy that he had was incredibly strong. They got powdered MDMA, dissolved it in water, and there was absolutely no way of telling. 5 little lots of MDMA, one was a lethal amount, but such a tiny little bit of difference can make all the difference that it needs.
And of course, what happened to you, you don't want to see other parents go through the same tragedy, which has prompted you, of course, to set up your charity.
Yes.
I mean, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to teach parents and children?
Well, for both, really. For young people, it's being aware, giving them the information that they need about what it is that they're taking, what it will be doing to them, what the risks can be, what the consequences might be, and also the life skills that they need to navigate those choices that they will face increasingly as they get older, the confidence about decision making. And for parents, it's being aware that it is part of their kids' world, and for them as well, just making sure that they have as much information as they can and keep those conversations as open as they can.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because often when you're young, you do feel you're invincible.
Yeah.
And we saw, of course, what's happened to these 12-year-old girls who took these Teddy tablets. And that's the point, they're even called Teddy tablets.
Yeah.
I mean, what are dealers trying to do here? Is it a common practice that they use names that might appeal to younger children?
Well, absolutely. I mean, they'll do anything that appeals to anybody that might buy it. It's a business, and there is no moral code or anything amongst suppliers. So anything that will appeal to a younger audience, if they think they're going to a younger market, then they'll do that. So things that are called Lego or Rockstar or, you know, the other things that we've seen in the news.
And it doesn't, of course, help the fact that some of these drugs, of course, that are coming onto the market are cheaper and they're also strong.
Yes, really strong. Yes, that seems to be the evidence that's coming out.
In that case then, Fiona, I mean, what can parents do? Should they be having those frank conversations with their own children?
Absolutely, yes. And from before they hopefully start encountering stuff as well. And to try to make sure as a parent that you know as much as you can and you've got information from a reliable source like Frank, but also to make sure that you are keeping those conversations as open as you can and try not to panic and lecture, which is a completely natural response.
All parents do
as a parent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's a very, very difficult job. And obviously, I mean, I feel like I'm the last person in the world to speak and say what you should do because it went so horribly wrong for me. But I have spent the last 2 years and 5 months today thinking, what could I have done? What should I have known and what could I have done differently?
Fiona, really nice to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up on 5 News tonight, the first diversity week for schools, but some campaigners express their concern about the age of pupils involved. Plus, Wales and England supporters hope tonight will bring success at the Euros. We'll see you after the break. Hello, welcome back. You're watching 5 News tonight. 38,000 school pupils are taking part in the UK's first School Diversity Week. Children aged 7 to 18 years old are involved in the campaign to raise awareness of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender issues in schools. Well, according to recent research, 90% of secondary teachers have witnessed homophobic bullying. The same number still hear the word gay used in a negative way by pupils. And 40% of pupils who experience homophobic bullying end up skipping school. Well, I'm joined now by Tim Ramsey, founder of the charity Just Like Us, which has organised the campaign, and Andrea Williams, who's Chief Executive of Christian Concern. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
Tim, let's start off with you. This is the first time we've had such a diversity week. I mean, what's its aim? What's it trying to do?
Well, I guess what it's not about is trying to sexualise or indoctrinate children. What it's really about is about well-being. Unfortunately, growing up LGBT is still so difficult. As you've seen in terms of school, but also 1 in 2 self-harm and 2 in 5 contemplate suicide. And we feel that's completely wrong. So what we want to try and do are 2 things. One is to combat and raise awareness about the damaging effects of homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying, but also send a really inspiring message to people who might be unsure of their sexuality or who are hiding it, but actually it's something to celebrate and it's a really positive thing.
Andrea, you may have a problem there because, you know, this is all going to be going out to all ages. This is not just secondary school children, this is primary school children. I mean, do you think that's appropriate?
Well, I think when we're looking at addressing this issue from the age of 7, I think that is far too young to be talking to our children about such issues. Just Like Us, this charity, one of us, this charity is called. And I think it's true to say that, of course, as human beings, the Christian teaching would say that each one of us is beautifully and wonderfully made and that we should embrace one another. But that does not mean to say that we have to necessarily accept and have placed central into our education this idea that all lifestyles are equivalent, that all lifestyles bring equal good. And again, so what we here are seeking to celebrate, what's being celebrated here, is really the indoctrination of something, of a lifestyle, of a new prevailing cultural orthodoxy. And those that would disagree find themselves coming into much trouble.
Tim, seven years old, though, I mean, do you think that is too young? I mean, what Andrea said, is it too young to talk about these things?
Well, I think there are 2 points. One is that prejudice starts very young. I mean, for example, 1 in 2 primary school teachers have heard the word gay being used negatively and have heard homophobic bullying. We don't, with racism, wait until a child gets to 14 or 15 to say that it's not suitable to say that, not appropriate. The other thing to bear in mind is now 1 in 12 children are adopted by LGBT parents. And I don't think it's fair on the children in those primary schools or their parents in the playground to say that in some sense they are second-class family relationships when they can be equally
and here what we need to be
loving.
saying, what we need to be really teaching our children is that the parents are the ones that need to be introducing these sort of concepts to the children. The idea that we can normalise these things for children as young as 7, and that teachers, I mean, indeed, at the Christian Legal Centre, we're dealing with teachers who get suspended for gross misconduct for refusing to read books to children that promote homosexuality.
What about, though, Andrea, the fact that at schools we're seeing, you know, that the homophobic bullying, as we said in our intro there, I mean, surely anything that can help, you know, tackle that is surely...
Of course, we're all against bullying of any kind, but certainly when it comes to teaching children about relationships as young as 7, what we need to be promoting is this beautiful model of marriage between man and a woman, and children within that construct. The idea, just for as young as 7, we're normalising lifestyles that...
I'm going to have to stop you because it's only fair that
I'm sorry, I think it's very unfair to say that a relationship between a man and a man or a woman and a woman can't be something that's loving and beautiful. And the thing
but you
for
want
me,
to promote this to 7-year-olds.
It's what the important thing for me is I can't understand what parent would ever want their child to grow up in an environment where they can't feel confident to be themselves and where they can face prejudice which affects their schoolwork and stops them from being able to fulfil everything they can.
Refusing to promote this. Teachers are being sacked.
Tim and Andrea, I'm afraid we're out of time, but a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, more than 2 years after Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared, photos have been released of personal items that have washed up on a beach in Madagascar. They include purses, shoes and a child's rucksack. And if they're recognised as belonging to any of the 239 passengers or crew, it could finally provide some answers for their families. Dominic Reynolds reports.
Frayed, damaged by water but recognisably bags, camera cases, children's luggage. They might have come from anywhere, except that on the Madagascar beach where they were found, plane debris recently washed up too. It was all found by Blaine Gibson, an American trying to find out what happened to MH370. And he told us he's doing it for the families.
I cannot imagine what it would be like to not know anything about what happened to a loved one for more than 2 years. If anything that I can do can provide some clues to help give them some answers and to make sure that the search goes on, that we don't stop, that's what I want to see.
MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur heading for Beijing on March the 8th, 2014, but it disappeared from radar after only 40 minutes in the air. The most expensive search in aviation history followed, but it found nothing. Until this washed up on an island off Madagascar's coast last summer. It was confirmed as part of MH370's wing. These items could simply have fallen from a ship, but experts say they fit the pattern of coming from the missing plane.
We're expecting to find debris like that. When an aircraft hits the water at high speed, and we know it must have done because bits of the aircraft have actually been found, it will fragment and tens of thousands of parts of the aircraft will float. I mean, seat cushions, clothing, bags in this case, they will float for many, many years.
Families of the 239 passengers and crew are now examining these pictures. Experts say the plane's black box recorders will probably never be found, so you could be looking at some of the best clues left in the mystery of what brought that plane down, what ended all those lives. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
On to football, and it's a key night for two of the home nations in France this evening. Both England and Wales could do with a victory to ease their nerves at least. England want to finish top of their group by beating Slovakia, whilst Wales are hoping to guarantee qualification for the knockout stages with a win against Russia. Well, fans of both sides, meanwhile, have been staying out of trouble. Let's go straight to Peter Lane in Saint-Etienne, where England are playing later. And Peter, is there a much more positive atmosphere there?
Well, Danny, both matches kick off at the same time tonight. Both teams looking to secure the best next steps in this tournament. England playing in the stadium behind me, Wales playing in Toulouse, and the French authorities have designated that match a high risk because of last week's violence involving Russian supporters. But so far today, fingers crossed, a much better picture than that. Fans arriving at the matches in good spirits and with high hopes.
Not a bad way to start your Monday morning. Coffee and croissant in the sunshine on a Euro 2016 road trip. The lads from Nutfield FC are on tour. They've driven from Surrey to Calais to Paris to Marseille to Nice to Lyon and now Saint-Etienne. All six living in one camper van, willing England on to success.
Dave, mate, you've got a croissant down there?
It's brilliant, it's all the boys together and you're going out there, you're supporting England all the way. It's what we've always wanted to do. We've wanted to do since we were kids.
We're getting on quite well actually, surprisingly. We had a couple of arguments, but that's given, isn't it really?
It's been great, it's been good seeing the country as well, so it's something we've never experienced.
It's got a lot calmer since Marseille, and the police have I think they've learned how to deal with the England fans.
Yeah, we've had a couple of dinks. The window fell out in the Channel Tunnel and someone reversed it into a bush. I won't name names.
And of course, eventually, lads, you're going to have to tidy up. But that can wait. England are already taking on Slovakia at Keepy Uppy. Fans from both sides making their score predictions for tonight's final group game.
2-1 Slovakia.
2-1 Slovakia.
1-1 today.
1-1.
Yes, that's good for England and for us.
3-0 England.
3-0 England, confident?
Yes, 3-0, definitely.
And over in Toulouse, more sunshine, more anticipation. Wales fans perusing the menu, hungry for success against Russia. These may be the last matches without a prospect of penalty shootouts, but it doesn't stop young fans learning the art. And of course, learning the songs.
Don't take me home, please don't take me home. I just don't want to go to school. I want to stay here watching Dad drink beer. Please, please, please don't take me home.
Peter Lane, 5 News.
Well, good luck to both of our teams playing tonight. That's all from us. Sean Welby has the weather next, and I'll be back with the updates throughout the evening. Thanks very much for watching. Enjoy the football. Bye-bye.